public relations and travel consultant, helping largely tourism and lifestyle businesses create and implement communications plans that generate buzz and find and craft stories that inspire and motivate. So a lot of my experience focuses on media relations and building relationships with strategic partners. But in recent years, I've put the ad dollars of my business and my clients largely into hosting press trips, travel agents, and key partners. However, I also work with clients on buying ads in print media, on Meta, newsletter content and strategy, and helping to determine what conferences and events to attend. So throughout the experience, throughout this talk, I'm going to talk about the food tour company that I launched in 2014 called Tasting Marrakesh Food and Cultural Tours. We offered bespoke tours in Morocco that took a dinner or wander with friends approach. Everything was private, customized to the guests, and we ended up offering 3 different tour options throughout from when I ran the company from 2014 until last year. So this is the project I'll speak about throughout the presentation, just providing some in-depth, more background information on to provide some more case study type information. But I'm also the podcaster behind Morocco's first travel podcast, Why Morocco? So conversations with the inspiring and creative personalities met while living in Marrakesh. And this podcast was also one of the channels I funded to promote my business, Tasting Marrakesh, but also my personal brand. So I'll make reference to this project as well throughout the project. So to get started, this is a bit of our plan for the evening. As I'm sure we all know, the media and communications landscape is changing rapidly with new channels emerging all the time. We're constantly hearing about what's the rage on TikTok, Instagram algorithms, people jumping from Twitter, threads, working with influencers, micro influencers. Is it worth it to, pay an influencer? Google for business, and if people still listen to radio and TV, and the answer is, of course, they do. But today we're going to talk about some tools to measure the effectiveness of where you may be spending your ad dollars and communications efforts. And to do that, we'll be looking at the who, what, where, when, why, and then reflecting on the how. So to get started, we want to understand the who. So who is it that you're communicating with? Who's your target audience? Whether that's customers or clients you're working with currently, or an audience that you want to be reaching. Understanding who it is that you're marketing to is just of utmost importance. And I like to, when I'm thinking about who it is that I'm marketing to, if I know who the client base is, or even if I don't, I like to think of it as an avatar. So knowing what their age bracket is, their location, where they live, what their spending habits are, what they do for fun, what values they hold, their lifestyle, careers that they might have. And, as much information as you can glean or think about who your ideal client is or who your current customer is, this helps to guide, when I'm thinking about this, my communication efforts to understand where they're hanging out online. So are they on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook? Are they using traditional media? So what newspapers are they reading? What news channels are they watching and radio stations are they listening to? Do they follow influencers on social media? And maybe it's not just the social media influencers, but maybe they're influenced by brands, businesses that they may turn to, advisors, etc., that are influencing them. Also, I like to look to what are my website's Google Analytics telling me. If you're not familiar with Google Analytics or have not yet set them up, we need to chat because this will tell you a lot about who's visiting your online website, including the location, what town they're in, time of date people are visiting your website, how they're finding your website, whether it's through an organic Google search or if they've clicked a link that from another website that connects to your website. It tells you what pages they visited and how long they stayed on your site for. And so this just helps me to inform when I'm creating, deciding where I want to spend my money, whether it be for ad buys or creating content for socials, what have you. It helps me to know if I'm using the right channels to reach these audiences. So just going back to my Tasting Marrakesh, when I first launched the business, I reached out to a friend who also worked in the industry and asked him what he thought I should charge, price point. And so I started working with that price point and, targeting the market that I thought would reach that. But at one point I had a potential client reach out. I sent them the details about, what the food tour cost and what was included, and they responded to say, your food tour costs more than my Ryanair flight. And anybody who knows Ryanair knows that you can fly for like 20 pounds from Europe to Morocco if you get a good deal. And so I was able to say, okay, well, he's not my ideal market because at that point I knew that my clients were American, British, appreciated private experiences, bespoke travel. They were luxury travelers. Nevertheless, though, this response still kind of threw me off. But knowing what I knew about my clients, that, I knew what magazines they were reading, and I targeted those magazines to reach them, to get the word out. Um, Through in-person interactions, I also came to know what other destinations they were holidaying in, so I could book my trips to those destinations to see what my competitors were doing to keep on top of the market. And they typically worked in C-suite positions, so I knew what hotels they would stay at, what types of airlines they flew, and their travel style. So when this comment came back, well, it threw me off guard. I was able to refocus my efforts and say, but I also know who my client is. And I also knew about this information, like I said, through Google Analytics. And so once I was clear on who my target market is, I was really able to expand, what other people I wanted to reach out to who could help me get to my target market. So that included people like tour operators and travel agents that I wanted them to include tasting Marrakesh as part of the tour offers that they were putting together for their clients looking to travel to Morocco. And because I knew what travel and lifestyle magazines and newspapers my ideal client was reading, I knew what publications to target. This drove traffic to our website, increased inquiries, and eventually bookings. Um, and so, how did I know that this worked? Guests either told me in their initial email to me that they read about tasting Marrakesh in the Times of London or the Telegraph or Condé Nast Traveler, Vogue, what have you. But also from my analytics, seeing the sites that were driving, I could see what sites were driving traffic. And when I met the guests, they also told me where they'd heard about tasting Marrakesh. So I always say it's worth asking when people pop into your business, if you get chatting, like, how did they hear about your business? Or how did they hear about your sale? Or whatever it is that you might be promoting. The other thing that I think we can get quite caught up in is doing, well, everybody else has a Facebook page, so I have to have a Facebook page. And when I was launching my channels, I did create a Facebook page because, again, that's what everybody else was doing. But what I realized was that my market wasn't on there. And how did I know? Because I never had a conversion from a post, a Facebook message inquiry, or anything. In fact, they would either, when people would ask me about my tours through Facebook Messenger, they either wouldn't respond or they would tell me that the prices were too expensive. So what I gleaned eventually was that my market was not there and it was not a channel I needed to focus on and dedicate resources to. So there were no meta ad buys for me for tasting Marrakesh. I also included ads on my Why Morocco podcast. And the Google Analytics, I could see from the Google Analytics. So this is just a type of what exactly you can pull out from Google Analytics. And so I could see that my demographic of listenership on my podcast was 60% female, 40% male, their ages, their location, and their interests as well. So the people who were listening were interested in lifestyle and hobbies, food and dining, and travel. And so again, with all of this information, it's free on Google Analytics, and it's literally a wealth of information that you can pull out to see who it is that you are attracting on your website. But I also had a sponsor on my podcast to help offset costs, and he was initially invited as a guest, and then we got chatting about sponsorship. And here's what he had to say too about uh, opting to add podcast advertising into his mix, is that he was able to receive a constant flow of inquiries from people that listen to the podcast. And without a doubt, these are leads that we would not have reached otherwise. So thinking about this
I
potentially, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mandy. I just have a question on this topic. How do you communicate with people, are not part of your market without creating a negative experience for them.
Okay, can I have like in what way would they be creating a negative experience?
Um, okay.
So for me, it's people that message me on these like online forums, say
Hmm.
Facebook, whatever,
Yep,
that are obviously, they're saying, oh, it's too expensive. Oh, you know, why don't you, you know, do whatever? They are certainly not my target market. So how do you communicate with them without
absolutely. So
being
with the,
rude?
for example, the Ryanair passenger, just say thank you so much for your interest. I appreciate your interest. This isn't at this time, this isn't a product that we offer.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Not at this time.
Okay,
Thank
but
you.
I mean, just going back to this question, um, to your question, Amelie, is, knowing all of like what I know from gleaning this from my website, it helped me to understand what I could say no to. So for example, when I was launching Tasting Marrakesh, eventually Airbnb experiences were launching. They got in touch and they wanted me to put it on their Airbnb, Get Your Guide, TripAdvisor, all of these types of travel um, you know, outlets. And I was able to say no because I knew I had a different strategy. I knew that that's where I wanted to focus, and I didn't want the Airbnb experiences, Get Your Guide, because we were a bespoke travel company. So just really sticking to what you know and your authentic brand. So after we understand the who, it's time to think about what we're communicating. What is your message? Are you promoting services, a sale, special event, creating general awareness about your business, launching a campaign, distributing a press release? All of these things are, what you're communicating. And once you've figured out what you're communicating, is it is your message on brand? Is it consistent with other messaging that you're putting out? Again, this is where if you're reaching a market that to target, just really making sure that, if it's, too expensive or whatever, somehow implementing, the cost or the experience, like the experience into what it is that you're doing so that you maybe are reaching the exact market that you want to. Um, Once you figured out how can your efforts be evaluated? How could you get feedback on the effectiveness of your efforts? So if you've created an event, it could simply be how many people showed up. It could be as informal as reviewing your likes, shares, and saves on Instagram to determine what content was most popular, or reviewing the effectiveness of other channels like I did with Facebook. So maybe Facebook just isn't where your market is. Whereas, with my food tour company, Instagram was a more engaging audience for me. So again, I was able to eliminate putting too much effort into Facebook. Again, Google Analytics, I can't stress enough how important this is to understand what pages people are visiting, where they're coming from. Organic search was one of the top drivers to my website, but my press mention in Condé Nast Traveler with a link to my website was in the top three, um, was one of the top three links that drove traffic to tastingmarrakesh.com. If you have a newsletter, perhaps you want to review the open rate on your newsletter, the click-throughs, and are people responding to your call to action? Are people unsubscribing? If you notice a drop in open rates or an increase in unsubscribes, it may be an indicator that your content is not appealing to your audience and you may need to dig deeper to understand what subscribers are looking for. Anecdotal feedback is probably one of my favorite ways to find out what people think. Um, it can be just as simple as like asking people, what they thought when they pop into your bricks and mortar store, or just having a chat with people that you meet as you're helping them to solve, whatever it is that they're visiting your business for. In with Tasting Marrakesh during COVID, we reopened in February 2021. I was quite shocked that we were able to reopen so quickly. But because we always met face to face with our guests in person, we were able to get to know them. And as we take a dinner and wander with friends approach, we felt like we were safe to ask them. They were Americans. At the time, Americans could only visit 6 countries in the world, according to our clients. Four of them they weren't interested in. Another one was Mexico. They'd been there several times and they'd never been to Morocco. So they chose to come to Morocco for a week. And that helped us to just understand, okay, the American market is probably going to come back a lot quicker. So we were able to focus our messaging and, also just get the business ready for an on like, new bookings that would come through. So anecdotal feedback, anytime you have the opportunity, I highly suggest asking people directly for what they think. Um, it could be as formal as hosting focus groups. For example, if you're looking for feedback on a campaign's effectiveness, and this feedback could impact both messaging, advertisement placement, and budget and future campaigns, depending on the questions that you ask. Surveys are another one, and this one is actually quite given. You can do a survey through MailChimp, through Google, SurveyMonkey. It actually is quite easy to send out surveys and um, decide like how people, get the information that you're looking for, how they want to be communicated with, what information they liked, what they think may be missing about whatever it was that you were organizing, communicating, what have you. I say interviews. This can be formal or informal. With Tasting Marrakesh, I had mentioned that I wanted to work with tour operators and travel agents. And so because I knew the travel agents that I was working with very well, a lot of them were friends of mine, um, I could just sit down and ask them, what new tours do you need us to develop? What feedback are you getting from your clients on our tours? How could we improve? What did they love? What do they think we should change? I could also ask them what their forecasts were like so that we could, if they were quite busy, we knew that we would be quite busy and I could prepare staffing and scheduling accordingly. I could also run a new business ideas through these friends of mine as well. So if you have those types of connections with key stakeholders that you're working with, interviews, just sitting down and grabbing a coffee can be a really great way to get some feedback on your communications. Online reviews. So I use Google for Business for my online reviews. I always sent a thank you email to Tasting Marrakesh clients, and I asked for feedback. And I often got some incredible constructive feedback that I implemented immediately into my communications channels. But also, if you don't ask for reviews and people suddenly leave a negative review, really look into those and think about, how could this be an opportunity to fix something that people seem to think needs to change about your product, your sale, whatever it is that you were organizing. And if you had media coverage, this was our press page for Tasting Marrakesh. Review the coverage and see what the journalists are saying. Are your target messages coming through, or is there an opportunity for improvement? Maybe they're noticing something that you haven't, and you could capitalize on this as a way to grow your business, to communicate differently, what have you, to reach your audiences. Any questions on this, on the what?
I don't see any in the chat
Okay,
unless somebody wants to ask directly.
sure.
Thank you.
All right. So let's move on to understanding the where. Um, where are you communicating? Are you on the radio? Are you mostly putting your efforts into social media? Do you have a podcast? Do you have multi-channel campaigns where maybe you have social media plus press efforts plus in-person events, plus brochures and printed materials that you're running? Or maybe it's just as simple, like, do you have a roadside sign on one of the main highways that points people to your business? Or do you have a pop-up, an activation in a high traffic area? I like to think of the where as kind of like a snapshot of what your organization is doing on the communications front. And so I kind of liken it to a bit like reviewing your budget, in terms of like, where are you spending your budget and where are you spending your efforts in terms of communicating. So similar to a budget, you might allocate your budget annually, but probably you review it quite frequently if you're like me. And I would say the same for communication. So how often are you reviewing the messages that you're putting out there and where, so that if you need to make a little, detour, if you will, from what you've put out there, you have the option to do that rather than just waiting until the end of the year and maybe spending continuous amounts of money on meta ads, for example, that might not be working, or um, radio ads that you may not be seeing as a direct impact. So those are just some examples. Um, I always like to say you don't just put your communications out there, especially given how important communicating one's business or company, nonprofit, what is, and then just like walking away and thinking everything's great. Also, like looking at the where, it helps you to see any gaps in your communications. So audiences you may be missing or new channels you may want to consider, where you're maybe spending too much money or time or not enough, and where the messages aren't targeted or relevant to a specific audience, or perhaps even no longer relevant. It will just help you determine your return on investment for any advertising dollars that you may be spending. But also, I don't, communications isn't just about the advertising dollars, it's about the time that is associated with it as well. So don't just think like financial, but the return on your time as well for investing in this. So when you think about where you're communicating, here are just a few prompts. I always like to build out a list. In fact, I have a big spreadsheet of all my communications messages throughout the year, broken down by month. And so just some things that you might want to consider reviewing. Just a couple things to think about are things like voicemail messages. So maybe you went on holiday in the summer and you noted that your business was closed for 2 weeks. If that voicemail is still hasn't been updated, that can have a direct impact on your bottom line. That certainly happened to me once I was looking for a cafe to go to, a restaurant for lunch. The voicemail said that they closed by the time I'd wanted to go, but in actual fact, they were open until 6. So I obviously went elsewhere and then learned after that they were open, so I could have gone there. Um, Things like your email signature as well are the logos and branding still up to date? Your If you have standard email responses that you send to clients, do you need to add or remove any information? Automatic responses on your emails, all of those things. Add them to your where of your communicating, because they all matter just as much as the social media. If you're putting out an ad, buying ad on like Instagram or Facebook, and then somebody reaches out to you on email and they get an incorrect automatic response, that can have a direct impact on the effectiveness of your campaign. So this is just a little rundown of the different channels that I had for tasting Marrakesh. So we had quite a few automatic responses that I would just kind of copy and paste. Google for Business, I was constantly reviewing. Again, it's great for SEO, so adding new images and whatnot to the platform. Event attendance, you also think about that because some events have an entrance fee. I was often, at least once or twice a week, I was at an event because we hosted a food and cultural tour. I was at cultural events, just again, getting out there that what we were doing, staying in the know. Instagram, again, Facebook, I said, didn't do a lot for us. We had our website, and again, constantly checking your website for any dead links that there might be on there. WhatsApp. The electronic signature, I quite like updating these different times. I had that we were recommended in Condé Nast Traveler, Wall Street Journal, the London Evening Standard, and links to those articles just to build our reputation. I included links to our podcast because I knew that we got a lot of clients who listened to my podcast booking their food tours. And I shared my Black Book to Marrakesh with the Toronto Star. So a lot of people could read that, and it just added that third party credibility that to what we were doing. And then again, we had an agent package as well that I shared with people who wanted to with tour operators who wanted to work with us. I think just going back to Google Analytics, again, I reviewed it and consistently, Condé Nast Traveler was driving some of the largest traffic to our website. And what this told me is that my efforts to meet with journalists and put the emphasis on press visits, um, and build time with these journalists paid off. I can also see from my sales that the conversion rate of those who inquired and those who booked, having read about our service in the Condé Nast Traveler, was almost 100%. Both Instagram and Facebook have analytic functions. If you've not already, spend some time hopping around, see what content is resonating. Is video more captivating than a static image? And do you need to work with some content creators or influencers to kind of enhance your profile? Um, also, as I was mentioning, we always like we had a dinner with friends or wander with friends approach. So I was constantly asking our guests for direct feedback if they weren't offering it up themselves. So if you own a bricks and mortar and people are popping by, ask them how they heard about you. Was it through a newspaper ad? Did they hear something on the radio? People will often offer this up. And it's free feedback. And then look at your reviews on Google, on TripAdvisor, and what are people saying? So, any questions about that before we move on to the why?
No questions, Mandy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So, once we know what we've put out there, it's time to think about why we distributed the message. Why did we do what we did? Why did we choose that channel? Why did we boost a Facebook post or print a brochure, hit publish on a website, buy a radio ad, host a journalist, paid an influencer? Was it to increase sales or increase awareness? Was it because you were hosting an event and you wanted to get the word out? Are you just simply looking to build relationships, um, and reach new markets? Or was it because that old adage of, well, everybody else was doing it? So how do we evaluate why we're putting these messages out there? So when I go back to Tasting Marrakesh, why did I host press previews? Each time I hosted a press, I was covering the cost of everything, but it was usually quite minimal, given, as I have shared previously, this was our press page, which significantly drove new business, drove traffic to my website, and with the right press targets, I could see a direct correlation to my bottom line. So there were certain, you know, um, outlets on here that as soon as the article would go out, I was getting I was getting inquiries immediately. MSN, for example, gets about 80 million hits a month. And so that was definitely a huge one. We didn't have the capacity to host 80 million people, of course, but just to give you an idea as to the volume that people can reach through press relations. Why did I care about agency visits and relationships building? Well, it resulted in bookings. The cost was purely relationship building. So whether that was taking somebody out for lunch, taking somebody on a tour, going for coffee, and just knowing that I could opt for this route rather than online engines like Get Your Guide, as I didn't have to pay them commissions. So, for example, again, if you're like a hotel or a guest house, maybe you're on booking.com, but and paying a commission of up to like 25%. Whereas if you were working directly with people who were selling your product, maybe could you keep that 25% in your business? Our rates were unpublished, so the tour operators that we were working with charged as they saw fit. And again, that's why I also created the agent tour operator package so that anytime somebody inquired about working with us, they had that information at their hand. And then Facebook. Why did I keep Facebook active when it wasn't even working for me? Well, had very little interaction. It never resulted in sales. It was kind of a waste of my time, but it was good for SEO. So our Facebook page lives on. Why did I update and review Google for Business? Google for Business costs absolutely nothing for your business to register, and it will drive significant traffic to your website if it's updated and maintained correctly. And then the podcast. There was a direct correlation to booking, and maybe you want to create whether it's a podcast or a newsletter or something that represents your business in a different way without being a hard sales tactic. There was a direct correlation to the bookings, but it also increased personal branding, but also the business branding. And the return on investment was incredibly high. Each episode at the time cost me about $100 in external costs, not including my time. But the ROI was beyond this, not just for the business, but for personal branding. So I had requests to join panel discussions, to write and edit a food and drink chapter for a leading media company, and to lead a workshop for a reputable university on creating tourism experiences. So it's not always just about the direct impact to the bottom line, but what other opportunities could this lead to that also increase awareness of the business? So any questions on the why? All right, let's move along to the when. When you communicate is as important as the message itself if you want to be effective. So, are you promoting a sale one day before and targeting locals only? If so, that may work. If you're looking to attract people from further away, may not be such a great investment. For media, if you're targeting newspapers, magazines, newspapers are typically community newspapers, weeklies are typically a week in advance. For glossy magazines, this can be months. Christmas roundups, if you want to get a product in one of the gift guides, these often start in the summer. On the other side, though, meta ads can be purchased and pushed live quite quickly if you have all the assets ready to go. Radio ads can also come out quite quickly. But the one thing I always remind people is that communications is a long game. What else are you doing when you don't have a sale, when you don't have a special event, promotion, etc.? What general awareness are you communicating about your business then? And then how do you communicate, or sorry, how do you evaluate your when? Again, going back to Google Analytics, I'm sure you've probably realized that this is one of my favorite channels. But what time of day are you getting the most traffic to your website? And, from where? Will it help if launching a new product? Or when to push a sale. This information can help to understand like when to push a new product or when to push a sale live if you know when people are on your website. If it's already too late after the majority of the people are no longer on your website, you may have missed an opportunity. Instagram and Facebook also have metrics, and you can often see like when are users most active online and responding to your content, seeing what you're opening. Newsletters. Again, if you use a service like MailChimp, when are your readers opening it? Is there a specific day that's better for them? Or, is Sunday a better day to send out your newsletter versus Monday when maybe people are a bit more hectic? Maybe Friday evening is a great idea if you want to capture somebody who's, or Saturday morning reading with their morning coffee. So all of these to think about as to when, and again, it goes back to understanding your audiences, their lifestyle, what they're doing, where they're getting their news source and whatnot, to know exactly when they may be most likely to see your message. Then there's the reflecting on the how. How else could you be communicating with your target market? Are there new channels that you could explore? So again, I had Tasting Marrakesh for quite a while. I knew I wanted to start a podcast, so I eventually started a podcast. It wasn't directly related to Tasting Marrakesh, but I knew it would be something that drove a new market to hear about what I was doing. And with any new initiatives, what budget would be required for this? And is there any time or human resources needed? Again, it makes me crazy when people don't account for the time, people's time that's put into it. Social media is hugely time consuming. Is there an activation that you want to do? So do you want to be, I don't know, at a farmer's market, promoting your initiative, your event, your sale, your new product, what have you? Are there new media outlets that you want to work with? Maybe you haven't worked with media in the past, and getting some coverage may actually do your business quite well. And it doesn't have to be the nationals like the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star. It can even community newspapers, magazines, CTV in our area can be hugely impactful, even more so than, a large national newspaper, depending again what it is that you want to communicate. So just thinking about how you're communicating, what new channels could you explore? Any questions on this so far?
There are no questions, Mandy.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so then we'll just move on. So this is just a bit of a recap of what we discussed, the who, what, where, why, when, and how, to really dive in and review how effective and impactful your communications efforts may be. This is quite a lot of information to digest, I understand. But again, it's kind of like I said, it's like a budget. Like you're just constantly reviewing, diving deep into these analytics, these statistics, what's working, what's not, where are you maybe losing money, earning money, what's paying off, what's not. So again, just think of it like your budget, in my opinion. And that brings us to the end.
Thank you, Mandy. For now, I'm just
Mhm.
gonna close. I will just, I guess, turn off the
Yeah,
recording
perfect.
first, and then
Mhm.
we'll go with the questions.
Perfect.